Jazz originated early in the century with small bands of 5 to 7 players in a style that became known as New Orleans, named after the place where the music, in its first iteration, codified itself. That style is now called Dixieland. Jazz is propelled commercially mostly by 12 to 15-piece big bands, usually with both a male and female vocalist, in a style that became known as swing during the 1930s. Swing was built around highly rhythmic riffs, with strong solos providing breaks, or moments of spirited improvisation against backdrops of arranged composition. With the rise of swing, band arrangers became as important as band soloists, and it was much more necessary for musicians to know how to read a score than it was in the earlier days of jazz. Some swing bandleaders became noticed celebrities during jazz heydays like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller, Jimmy Lunceford, the Dorsey Brothers, Stan Kenton, Artie Shaw, and a score of others. Jazz has also produced its share of star soloists by the 1930s, including trumpeter Louis Armstrong, saxophonist Coleman Hawkins, clarinetist and saxophonist Sidney Bechet, saxophonist Lester Young, pianist Art Tatum, pianist and singer Fats Waller, drummer Gene Krupa, and trumpeters Harry James, Roy Eldridge, and Big Spaderbeck. It is clear that despite its humble origins among the lower classes, immigrants, and African Americans, jazz was never really a folk music.
It professionalized and standardized itself fairly quickly, becoming highly sophisticated show and stage music within a half dozen years of its initial arrival on sound recording in 1917.
Things would soon begin to change by 1935, the year that marked the beginning of the swing era. Benny Goodman, who had established a stellar reputation with studio and radio work, assembled a band of top musicians with the intent of concentrating on jazz arrangements rather than pop tunes. Securing a record contract with Victor Records, Goodman then proceeded to grab a spot on the Let's Dance radio program. Goodman would soon realize the power of radio when, on a less than successful transcontinental tour, the band was a smash hit at the Palomar Ballroom in Los Angeles, where Goodman's slot on the Let's Dance show was during prime time.
Soon, Goodman's band would garner a national following, culminating with a first-ever jazz concert in New York's prestigious Carnegie Hall. Soon, the country was swing crazy. Trombonist Tommy Dorsey had a million-seller record with Irving Berlin's tune, Marie. Artie Shaw, Benny Goodman's clarinet rival, had a million-seller with Cole Porter's Begin the Begin.
If it ain't got that swing.
Despite the amount of success at the time, several factors led to the demise of the swing era. For example, the recording ban from August 1942 to November 1944, in which the union that most jazz musicians belonged to told its members not to record until the record companies agreed to pay them each time their music was played on the radio, the earlier ban of ASCAP songs from radio stations, World War II, which made it harder for bands to travel around, as well as the cabaret tax, which was as high as 30%, and the change in music taste. Though Ellington and Basie were able to keep their bands together, by the end of 1946, most of their competitors were forced to disband, bringing the swing era to a close.
Stop all the clocks! I just got the news that my baby wants to rock. All she wants to do is rock.
By the 1940s, cover versions of African American songs were commonplace and frequently topped the charts, while the original musicians found success among their African American audience, but not in the mainstream. Meanwhile, jazz performers began to push jazz away from a danceable popular music towards more intricate arrangements, improvisation, and technically challenging forms, culminating in the bebop of Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, the cool sounds and modal jazz of Miles Davis, and the free jazz of Ornette Coleman and John Coltrane. African Americans in the 1940s and 1950s were developing an outgrowth of rhythm and blues into a genre called rock and roll, which featured a very strong backbeat, and whose prominent exponents included Louis Jordan and Wynonie Harris. However, it was with white musicians such as Bill Haley and Elvis Presley playing a guitar-based fusion of black rock and roll with country music called rockabilly that rock music became commercially appealing. Rock music thereafter became more associated with white people, though it did give some black people such as Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley a high level of commercial success.
Without a word of warning, the blues walked in this morning.
The late 1950s also saw a vastly increased popularity of hard blues from the earliest part of this century, both in the United States and the United Kingdom. The 50s also saw doo-wop become popular. A secularized form of American gospel music called soul also developed, with pioneers like Jackie Wilson and Sam Cooke leading the wave.
How sweet it is to be loved by you. Yes, baby.
Soul and R&B became a major influence on surf, as well as the chart-topping girl groups like the Angels and the Shangri-Las, only some of whom were white. In 1959, Berry Gordy founded Motown Records, the first label to primarily feature African American artists aimed at achieving crossover success. The label developed an innovative and commercially successful style of soul music with distinctive pop elements. Its early roster included The Miracles, Martha and the Vandellas, Marvin Gaye, and The Temptations, The Supremes, and others. Black divas such as Aretha Franklin became 60s crossover stars. By the end of the decade, blacks were part of the psychedelia and early heavy metal trends, particularly Jimi Hendrix. Hendrix was himself the primary innovator on the electric guitar and was among the first guitarists to use effects pedals such as the wah-wah pedal. Psychedelic soul began to flourish with the 1960s culture. Even more popular among blacks and with more crossover appeal was album-oriented soul in the late 1960s and early 1970s, which revolutionized African American music with intelligent and introspective lyrics, often with a socially aware tone. The development of black music evolved from the individuality and creativity of the 1920s jazz age to the moving, soulful music of the 60s. The number of artists involved in this time period were responsible for inspiring the great musicians and singers who came soon after.